Most riders assume that if they just got fitter, stronger, or worked harder physically, their riding would improve. And on the surface, that sounds logical, because riding is physical. It demands strength, it demands stamina, it demands coordination. So riders start going to the gym, they start doing Pilates, they start running, lifting weights, doing circuits, mobility work, all trying to become a better rider through improving fitness. And sometimes they do become fitter. But what confuses people is this. Despite becoming fitter, their riding still feels inconsistent. Their position still collapses under pressure, their balance still changes, their hands still become unstable, one side still works harder than the other. And that's where riders start questioning themselves. Because they think, if I'm fitter now, why hasn't my riding changed properly? The reason is because riding is not simply a fitness problem. And this is where most riders completely misunderstand what their body is actually doing. Because riding is an output, it's the result your body produces based on the movement patterns, stability strategies, and neuromuscular pathways already available. So if the underlying movement system hasn't changed, the riding output usually doesn't change either. That's why being fit alone is often not enough. And today I want to explain why. Most riders have experienced this at some point. You work on yourself physically, you feel stronger, you feel more aware, you feel like your body should perform better, but then you ride. And the same patterns appear again. Maybe you struggle to maintain your position consistently. Maybe one hip tightens. Maybe your shoulders creep up. Maybe your lower leg moves. Maybe your hands become busy the moment things become more demanding. And often the rider can correct it temporarily. That's what makes this so confusing. You can apply the instruction, you can think about it, you can hold the correction for a moment. But then the moment the demand increases, transitions, canter work, jumping, lateral work, tension, speed, nerves, fatigue, your body defaults straight back to the same pattern again. And most riders interpret that as, I just need to try harder. But that usually isn't true. Because the body does not default to what is technically correct. It defaults to what feels safest, most stable and most familiar to the nervous system. And that changes how we need to think about rider fitness completely. One of the biggest misconceptions in rider fitness is assuming that strength automatically transfers to your riding. There are riders who improve their general fitness and absolutely see improvements in their riding. And typically that happens because the rider already has relatively good movement patterns, proprioception, body awareness, coordination and control. So when they become fitter or stronger, they are building onto a movement system that already functions reasonably well. Their body can utilise that increased strength effectively. But for many riders, that is not what happens, because improving general fitness and improving movement quality are not always the same thing. A rider can become fitter through going to the gym, running, lifting weights, doing circuits, general exercise classes, and absolutely improve cardiovascular fitness, strength or endurance. But if movement awareness is poor, if stabilisation strategies are poor, if they cannot properly control how their body moves, if exercises are performed with compensation, tension, imbalance or poor technique, then the nervous system often reinforces the exact same movement patterns already appearing in the saddle. So the rider becomes fitter, but not necessarily better organised. And this is why many riders experience partial improvement. They may feel stronger, they may last longer, they may feel less fatigued, but they still struggle with consistency. They still lean, their hands still become uneven, their leg placement still changes, their coordination still disappears under pressure, one side still works differently from the other. Because riding is not just about producing force. Riding is about how the body organises movement under demand. And that is a very different thing. When you ride, your body is constantly managing multiple things at once. You are stabilising, you are absorbing movement, you are coordinating timing, you are responding to external forces, you are maintaining balance while the horse is continually changing underneath you. At the same time, your muscles are constantly working through a combination of isometric contractions concentric contractions and eccentric contractions. Often simultaneously. That means riding is not simply core strength or fitness. It is an integrated movement. And if the nervous system does not trust certain areas to stabilise effectively, the body will compensate automatically. Not because the rider is lazy, not because they are weak, not because they aren't trying, but because the body is solving a stability problem. This is why two riders with similar levels of fitness can ride completely differently. One rider may look stable, fluid and quiet. Another may look tense, uneven or unstable despite being physically strong. Because strength alone does not determine movement quality. The nervous system determines how movement is organised. And under pressure, the body always returns to its most established patterns. That's why riders often feel like, I know what I'm supposed to do, but my body won't maintain it. Because intellectually understanding a correction is completely different from the body having the movement capacity and stability pathways to sustain it automatically. This is where riders unknowingly get stuck. Because most people respond by doing more. More riding, more lessons, more corrections, more effort, more fitness. But if the underlying movement strategy hasn't changed, all you are really doing is repeating the same output again and again. And repeating reinforces patterns. The nervous system learns through repetition. So if your body has learnt to stabilise by gripping through the hip, bracing through the lower back, tightening through the shoulders, collapsing through one side, or shifting weight unevenly, every ride reinforces that strategy further, even when you're trying to correct it. Because effort cannot override established movement patterns. And this is where riders become frustrated, because they feel like they are failing. But the body is not failing, the body is responding. It is using the movement solution it currently trusts most. That's why riders can often look completely different at walk versus canter, or at home versus competition, or relaxed versus under pressure. Because as the demand increases, the nervous system prioritises stability over technical perfection. And if true stability is missing somewhere, compensation will appear somewhere else. That compensation is not random, it is a strategy, a borrowed form of stability. And until the underlying movement pattern changes, the riding output usually won't change consistently either. This is why I believe riders need to stop asking, how do I force myself into the correct position? And start asking, why does my body lose the position in the first place? That shift changes your perspective, because now we stop blaming the riding and instead we start understanding the movement system behind the riding. This is the difference between chasing symptoms and understanding causes. A rider collapsing through one side is not simply a posture issue. Busy hands are not just a hand problem. A swinging lower leg is not always a leg problem. Very often, these are outputs of how the body is organising stability elsewhere. And until you understand the pattern underneath it, you can spend years trying to correct the visible symptom without changing the actual reason it keeps appearing. This is why my entire approach starts with an assessment. Because before we talk about exercises, before we talk about workouts, before we even talk about a riding position, we first need to understand what the body is actually doing. What movement patterns already exist, what the nervous system trusts, where stability is being borrowed from, where compensation is occurring. Because once you understand that, the process becomes far more logical. You stop fighting your body and instead you start retraining the movement system underneath the riding itself. This is also why general fitness alone often doesn't fully transfer into the saddle, because riding is not just about becoming stronger. It is about how your body coordinates, stabilises, responds and organises movement patterns while managing the constant change in demands of the horse underneath you. And until you understand how your body is currently functioning, it becomes very difficult to create consistent change in the saddle. That's exactly why I created my free How I Assess Riders video. In that video, I break down the movement patterns and compensations I commonly see in riders and explain what they often mean when they appear in the saddle. It's not about blaming the rider, it's not about trying harder. It's about understanding what your body is actually doing. You can access that free video by signing up through the link below. And once you start viewing riding through this lens, a lot of things that previously felt confusing suddenly starts making sense.